Hello and welcome to this special report from Black and White on the issues of today that are important to all of us. In this special report, you will hear from important people who are knowledgeable about the subject matter we're going to discuss so you can keep abreast of the important issues of today. Now, let's go to Dan and Daryl.
Welcome back. Joining with us today is a distinguished attorney, John Connor, who I had an opportunity to speak to at length yesterday, and I'm excited about having him on the show because of his wealth of experience. John, welcome to Black and White, and thank you for joining us today.
Dan, good to be with you.
Yes, sir. Tell us a little bit about you and your firm and your illustrious career, because I was very impressed, and that's why I wanted to have you on. So tell our audience of about 7 million people who you are.
Well, I'm a trial lawyer from San Francisco. I've been doing this for 49 years. I was a prosecutor for 6 years with government, and then I represented the government in the savings and loan crisis. So I've done a lot of government work in private practice. I've also tried a lot of cases, and I've always been a Watergate buff. Was big on Deep Throat, and ended up in early 2002 representing Mark Felt because I knew he was Deep Throat. I approached him and then became his lawyer and co-author on a book. And I've recently, as a result of my experience with the Post in all this with Deep Throat, I've come to have a radically different view of Watergate and more importantly, the reporting that was done in Watergate, and how, rather than this being the exception to the rule, Dan, of biased journalism, it's really what invented and started our today's biased journalism. And that's one of the things that probably is my key issue. Even though I practice law every day, I still have my cases and so forth and so on. But my passion, sort of my hobby, is writing about media, the way media portrays things without critical thought. And I think that the media, the non-national media, such as your show, which necessarily connects to audiences, is much more market-driven by the market of ideas, by the free market of ideas, and is more part of it. And I see some of the internet side, some of the podcasts, some of that's bubbling up in our country as being the only saving grace we have, as opposed to the national media controlled by a few people out of New York and Los Angeles. So it's too bad.
Yes, one of the things that we talked about yesterday, and your publicist was telling me, was I'm not, you didn't use this word, I'm using this word, although you're free to use it if you want it. You're disgust with the mainstream media and how they handled the young man's case in Wisconsin.
Oh, this is just a variation on a theme, Dan, that I've been talking about and I've been warning about for years now, since I started understanding what was going on. But this is a case in point where a very important national example, so to speak, of our country's discussions was so misreported by the media. Here you have a fellow that responds to violent riots in a way that we would think is right. He was doing two things. Kyle Rittenhouse was in Wisconsin to protect property, not to go out and shoot anybody, but to keep his friend's property from being destroyed. That's okay. That's what we're supposed to do. And as a matter of fact, you're supposed to take what we lawyers call self-help. You're supposed to protect your own property. Don't just expect somebody else to come and do it for you. That's number one. Number two, the fellow brought a medical kit with him because he knew there were people that were getting injured. He thought they might need first aid. So he was there to protect property and protect health and safety. And yet he was depicted as being a terrible vigilante. He only shot people because they tried to kill him.
Right.
And that's just black and white. But it was still to this day is not reported correctly. If the facts are otherwise, if the jury considers this in depth, comes out with a unanimous verdict, still MSNBC and CNN this must mean the jury, something's mad with the jurors. They don't understand our wisdom. So that's a great example of how we're being lied to in the media. I can't say it any other way. They were lying.
So when you and I talked yesterday, I asked you a series of questions, and I'll ask one of them right now is, do you think he has a case against the media who misrepresented the truth?
Absolutely, Dan. I think he's got a very good case against anyone in the media who has made a factual representation about him that is false, as opposed to an opinion that you can't hang a defamation suit on. But a factual statement that is false and knowingly false or recklessly false gets you a jury verdict. And the jury can award damages simply based on his damage to his reputation without any specific dollar here, dollar there. They have latitude to do that, and I think they should do that in his case. Some of the statements that supposedly responsible outlets like CNN and MSNBC were making were just horrid. They wanted their own narrative. So they said he took his gun and was going up to Wisconsin to shoot black people. That's absolutely not the truth. And he's not a racist. He's in favor of BLM. There are all kinds of specific statements that are made, probably too many of them to count. And I haven't gone back and looked at each one, but certainly just the places that called him a white supremacist and a racist and a shooter of black people and a person who intended to shoot black people. None of that is true. He can get to a jury, and I think the jury is going to be very sympathetic to him.
You said to me yesterday something that I had not heard before, and I think it's important for the audience to hear it for themselves. We talked about a reasonable period of time that a news outlet had to correct its mistake before, and if they didn't within this period of time, they could be held accountable for what they said. And I believe that you said it was 3 days.
Yeah, normally it's 3 days. It's 3 days in California. You have to correct your statement, or again, you can get these damages that I talked about. I think in this case, there are different state laws that apply in terms of corrections and so forth. But the fact is, the fellow has a lawsuit right now. That's the long and short of it. And so I think he's in good shape here. Let me put it that way.
He may be in good shape financially after all this is done and settled, but isn't his life basically over in terms of I mean, look what happened at the University of Arizona, where he was taking online courses. They want to bar him from the university. He's paying going to be paying a very difficult price for what he did, which appeared to be honorable in his intention. And yet the media has crucified him so much that there is hate and vitriol against him all over the country.
Well, you got a good point, Dan. We like to think in America, we have the right to pursue our happiness in our own way. It's in the Constitution. It's in the Declaration of Independence. Mm-hmm. But this fellow has had that taken away from him. Whatever he does, and I wish him well, and I hope he enjoys what he does, whatever niche he finds. But it is not the niche that he selected himself through life. As we all journey through life, we have some ability to choose our own path. He doesn't have that,
right? Because
the media took that away from him. Think about how many people have been injured in all these riots, but nobody paid any attention to the fact that there might have been people killed by rioters. But now here's Kyle Rittenhouse. They've decided to pick on him, and they picked on him and really essentially forced the DA to charge him. I hope I would have been brave enough as a DA not to do it, but I understand the politics. with the media outcry, they were forced to do this. And now here's Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old who had the greatest intentions, the greatest heart in the world. And he's a nice kid and not an unintelligent kid. And now he's had his career taken away from him. Now, for a kid who would like to have a nice, normal college life, he can't go to Arizona State without people dogging him and yelling and screaming. All these leftist groups are saying he shouldn't go to Arizona State. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to live an ordinary life. He's got one life. He's one person. He doesn't get to do this again. He's not going to be reincarnated, I don't think. And so they've taken that away from him. And it's a shame. They don't care. He was nothing more to the media than a tool for their own narrative. Boy, we've got a guy here. We can paint him as a vigilante, because the whole danger to America, under one way of thinking, is these white people who are out there with guns and are foaming at the mouth, don't have teeth, and like Donald Trump. That's the narrative. And that's what we should all be afraid of, not these nice rioters. They're just racial justice rioters.
Right.
Well, Kyle Rittenhouse kind of shows that narrative, if you put it a certain way, their narrative, and they weren't going to let the facts get in the way. And it is terrible when you think now what these folks will do. They're like a bunch of jackals jumping on people.
Now we have to take a break for a commercial message. We'll be right back. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back. We're having a fascinating conversation about law and justice with John O'Connor. John, we finished the last segment talking about Mr. Rittenhouse and how his life will be impacted, and you helped us understand a little bit about the law, about correcting your errors as a news media. We didn't talk about this yesterday, and I'm not trying to spring it on you. It just came to me this morning as we were talking. We had the Washington Post a few weeks ago devoted, I don't know how many column inches of type, to adjusting their narrative on the Steele dossier and the guilt of Donald Trump. That wasn't 3 days, John.
Right. It wasn't 3 days. And I wrote about this in 2017, Dan, so I'm not making up the fact that they should have known early on about the phoniness of this dossier. I started writing about this right after the dossier came into being. I laughed at it. It's like a comic book. It makes no sense. It's clear what it is. And it is clear who Christopher Steele is. But yet the Post got it wrong for the last 4 years. And all they really corrected, when you really get down to it, is who this fellow Sergey Millian was, we had all long thought, and it had been represented to all of us, that he was one of the witnesses for Steele. Now, even if he were a witness, unlike the Post, it's very clear that if he were a witness, he would be a phony witness. And the Post thought that he was just a great guy. As I've written, they claimed he was a shrewd businessman caught up in this, perhaps just an innocent citizen, maybe a little of both. But boy, the Sergey Millian has really got the goods on Trump. Well, guess what? Anybody that knows anything about this, in about 1 second, I read this thing and I saw that he was both source D and source E in the Steele dossier, meaning that this fellow that has a flat on Astoria Avenue in the Queens, this 38-year-old guy, knew both ends of an international conspiracy. He knew enough from Putin to know this, and he knew enough from Trump. And he didn't know either. It was all made up. He's a former military translator from Belarus, and he's just kind of a shuck and jiver, which even Christopher Steele admitted. But my point is that even if he was the source, he wasn't the source. It was really a Clinton campaign aide named Charles Dolan. But even if Sergey Millian were the source, the Post should have known it was phony, because he had no basis to say what he was saying. It had to be phony, and he didn't know of what he spoke. So now the Post is correcting their error as if that was the only error in naming Sergey Millian when in fact, it turns out it wasn't. And actually, I don't blame the Post for saying that Sergey Millian was the source, because that's what everybody represented, including Christopher Steele, everybody else. So the Post wasn't really to blame for naming Sergey Millian as the source. They're to blame for thinking that he was telling the truth and he wasn't a phony guy.
Yeah.
And he looks like, and he was investigated by the Justice Department as being a Russian spy. And that shows you how much faith people should have had in the guy. So yes, now they're saying, okay, it wasn't Sergey Millian. Gosh, we made a good faith mistake. But this just goes to show you how bad they are. They're correcting this because they have to correct it, but it's like it misses the point of how poor their reporting is and how uncritically thinking they are, and how credulous they are in accepting any phony narrative, so long as it hurts Donald Trump and, I guess, in general, conservatives.
John, I have been asking this question for a long time, and I haven't got what I consider to be a satisfactory answer. So I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I just want to ask you the question. It's my understanding that on the affidavit that the government files with the FISA court, the signers of the affidavit swear to its accuracy. Now, we had at least 5 different government officials, maybe more, that signed several of the FISA warrants, knowing that they were false. And yet, John, nobody's gone to jail. Nobody's been tried. And yet we know that they broke the law, because as I understand it, you signed that affidavit for the FISA warrant. It's a felony if you lie. So what's going on, John, as to why nobody has gone to jail for all the activities that took place under the dossier and other things and activities of the Obama administration? Why is it nobody's been charged, convicted, gone to jail?
Well, Dan, I'll quote Winston Churchill, falsehoods get halfway around the world before truth gets its pants on. In this case, that mechanism was even put on steroids by 2 things. Mueller had an investigation for 2 years, and guess what? He didn't think that he should look into all the falsities that went into the dossier. So actually, it helps Durham that he did not. And actually, it's a good thing that he didn't, but he didn't. And that sort of kept an investigation at bay for the time that he was in charge. Now, Durham's appointed right after Mueller. Barr smartly names Durham to investigate this. Then we have COVID. So out of the first 24 months of Durham's investigation, 15 of them have been hampered by COVID. That means you can't impanel a grand jury. You can't bring people in. This is the kind of thing you need all the various people to come in and say, no, he told me, here's what I thought, here's what I got, here's why I thought was false, true. I told McCabe, and McCabe told me to do this. So he wants that. Now, here's what I would tell you. We have one conviction, and that's one that could be done without a COVID grand jury, and that's this Kevin Kleinsmith, who clearly altered a document that went to the FISA court. He pleaded guilty. People were upset that he only got probation. I was cheering. And the reason I was cheering, Dan, is that indicates to me that Kevin Kleinsmith is a cooperating witness. And he's getting probation because he is. I will do you 2 things. He lied. He did that on the 4th FISA application. My first thought is he's not the only person that knew that he altered that email. Other people on the team knew it. They knew how important it was that he not give up the fact that Carter Page was an honest and patriotic man, which this was all about, because the FISA warrant was based on Carter Page being a Russian agent. The whole thing falls apart if he truthfully relayed that email. So that means that several other people are likely in bed with Kleinsmith when he did it, and he'll be able to name them. Now, let's go to the 3 applications before that. The only reason Kleinsmith had to alter that email is that email was not requested until the fourth application by a fellow that was an honest supervisor who puts these things together with the Justice Department. But for the first three applications, it's very clear from the Inspector General's report that the FBI concealed the truth about Carter Page. They knew that he was a patriotic, honest, cooperating witness when he had been approached in 2013 by Russian agents. He was completely on the up and up, and as a matter of fact, was about to be a witness for the FBI and the Justice Department in early 2016 when this fellow Buryakov pleaded guilty. So he didn't need to appear at trial, but they knew he was honest. They were going to use him as a witness. And they don't tell the FISA court that they know this guy's honest, that they've been through the thing with him before when he was approached by agents, and he proved that he was honest and patriotic by rebuffing them earlier. Now they're saying he's now in bed in 2016 with the Russians. Absurd. And if they would have told the court about Carter Page's true history, we couldn't have gotten a FISA warrant. So the number of people that lied, I count at least 5 or 6, Dan, that I think will go to jail. Person that is probably right now not going to be prosecuted unless somebody flips on him is James Comey. I know he knew all about, I think he knew all about this, but he's going to say he was misled or was told different things by his underlings. You know, he just assumed that everything in the FISA application was true. Now, interestingly, even Comey had Carter Page on his radar in early 2016 and himself had a personal briefing of the president and others about Carter Page. The problem is, even back then, Comey was trying to spin Carter Page as a Russian agent. So he's probably protected there by his false reporting earlier that he thought he was a Russian agent. So I think Comey's protected, but I think these other folks are not. So I'm looking for 5 or 6 FBI indictments. I'm looking for other people in the Clinton campaign. For instance, there's several people that conspired with this Michael Sussman to conjure up a false story about Alpha Bank. Look for several people to be indicted there. The Sussman indictment was a one-off like Kleinsmith's was, and for a little portion, a little crime that he committed by himself. All his conspiracy crimes are yet to come. Those conspiracy crimes will involve a fellow named Joffe, who is a tech executive. I think he's going to be indicted. There are a couple of researchers, I don't know their name. There may be some other people from the Clinton campaign. I don't know Jake Sullivan, who at the time was a Clinton campaign aide, now is a national security advisor to Biden. It's clear he knew that this Alpha Bank story was false. The question is, did he conspire to get it into the into the FBI? If he did, then he's conspiring to make a false statement to the FBI. I don't know enough about the evidence against Sullivan as to that particular hooking to that conspiracy, but it's enough to know he knew the story was false. He was on a lot of emails where they knew it was false. And I think there's a chance he might get indicted. I just don't know the evidence close enough. But there are some very live indictments still out there. Durham has been hampered by the things I talked about, but I don't think we should give up hope about this.
I have one last question. We got a couple of minutes. Listening to what you said was just fascinating. But I wondered, John, we talked about the possibility of certain people being indicted and possibly going on a trial and being convicted. But I look at another event all encompassing in this that really has me concerned. We seem to have, over the last, let's say, 40 years, seen a steady decline in the quality and the accuracy of the FBI. And it appears to me, it has become much more political in its operation and the decisions it's making as opposed to enforcing the law.
Well, that's right. And look at Mark Felt's case. This is the way it started out because no one knew he was deep throat. The lefties in the Carter administration actually indicted him for trying to protect our country against the PLO and the Weather Underground. So what we saw is that the FBI was prosecuted early on for being straight. Okay, now as time goes on, it becomes very clear to anybody with a brain that whatever you do as an FBI agent, an FBI official, is going to be praised in the media if you're going left and if you're helping any Democratic regime that's in power. If you do that, you're going to successfully politicize the Bureau. That's what Deep Throat, what Mark Felt was against, was politicizing the Bureau. That's why Hoover was considered such a stubborn guy. He refused politicization of the Bureau. And now here we are with James Comey talking about how terrible J. Edgar Hoover was. Well, guess what? Comey was the political being. Comey understood that the media will always be on his side as long as he is skewering the right side of the spectrum and protecting the left side. So I see the FBI, especially the FBI top brass, the ones that are politically attuned and close to Clinton. See, Comey and his gang stood to benefit, unlike a regular street agent. The regular street agents in the FBI are still very honest and straight. It's the top guys that you have to worry about, the top guys that are influenced by politics. All these guys saw their streets lined with gold when Hillary got into power. There are all kinds of plum things that can come from it, either with the FBI or when they go into private business. So that's what happened to the FBI. The FBI was corrupted by media, just like so many other people have been, and so many politicians have been. I can go out and I can start yelling about white people being terrible and about different issues and about people not liking that are client deniers and nobody's going to criticize me for making stupid statements. I will be criticized if I make a statement that says, well, wait a second, I don't think we have proof as to the feedback effect on water vapor and clouds that come from equatorial heating, which I study a lot. But if I say that, I'm a climate denier. Right. It's a very, very tough world we live in, but the FBI lives in that world, to get back to you, and you can see how they get politicized. Even the present fellow, I don't think is a terrible guy, but he's got his finger up to the winds, and he's not going to do anything that's going to get him criticism from the left. He doesn't want that.
John, it's been a pleasure having you on. How do people follow you? Do you write commentary? Do you have a blog? Do you have a book you'd like to plug? What? How can we watch you?
Well, what I would say is I've got all my articles put up on my book site. I have a book, Postgate, How the Washington Post Betrayed Deep Throat, Covered Up Watergate, and Began Today's Partisan Advocacy Journalism. The site is postgatebook.com. Your viewers can go on there, get my book, get my articles, and I have a podcast that's a lot of fun called The Mysteries of Watergate. You can just click on the podcast icon on my site and get a podcast that'll tell you some fun things. It's really for when you're hiking or driving and you want to listen about history. I've got it all down in this podcast. And I do this stuff for public information and to inform the public. Don't sell advertising or any of that stuff. So I hope people can wake up to our media culture and figure out what we can do about it.
John, thank you for joining us.
Dan, it's been great. Thank you.
You bet. We'll have you on again. We'll be right back.
Thanks for joining us today on Black and White. If you missed any of this terrific interview, you can hear it and many more by going to blacksandwhites.us. Click on the archive section. Keep yourself well informed and come back soon. If you are interested in reaching our vast Black and White Network audience with your products or services, then contact Hollis Media Group at 1-855-673-8635. That's 1-855-673-8635 for more information on this great opportunity.